Mr. Jackson and the Baby Hulk family owned multiple businesses, and on this particular day, Mr. Jackson had to attend a meeting at one of their companies. Only a few people there knew who he was, but the manager was not one of them. What unfolded next was a lesson in assumptions and consequences. Dressed sharply in a fine tuxedo, Mr. Jackson entered the building, making his way toward the meeting room. As he walked with confidence, the manager, mistaking him for someone who didn't belong, rushed toward him as if he were security. "Sir, you're not supposed to be up here. You're going the wrong way," the manager barked, blocking his path. Mr. Jackson remained silent, observing how far the man would take this. One of the employees who recognized him was about to intervene, but with a slight shake of his head, Mr. Jackson signaled him to hold back. He wanted to see the manager's true colors. The manager, growing bolder, continued, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately." Just as Mr. Jackson was about to speak, the door to the meeting room opened. A colleague stepped out, scanning the room before his eyes landed on Mr. Jackson. "Mr. Jackson, we've been waiting for you," he said with urgency. Mr. Jackson turned to the manager, leaning in close to whisper, "I'll talk to you after the meeting. By the way, I'm the owner." The color drained from the manager's face. He looked around in disbelief as his boss approached, shaking his head in disappointment. "I tried to tell you who Mr. Jackson was," the manager's boss said, "but he wanted to see your true colors first. And now, we both have. Out of all the people here, you stopped him just because he was the only black man walking toward the meeting. I had no idea you were like this." Embarrassed, the manager could only stand in silence as his boss turned and walked away. 2 hours later, the meeting concluded, and Mr. Jackson made a call. "Bring him in here," he instructed the manager's boss. Moments later, the manager entered the room, his demeanor entirely changed. "Sir, I just want to say I am truly sorry." Mr. Jackson raised a hand, cutting him off. "I don't need an apology," he said firmly. "I need you gone. You will not be working for my company anymore. Go pack your things and leave." The manager's shoulders slumped as he nodded. But before he could turn away, Mr. Jackson added, "And let me make something very clear. You will not find work in this town again. My family knows every business owner here. Consider this your final opportunity to learn a lesson. Now, leave." The manager swallowed hard, nodding. "Okay," he muttered, before walking out of the office for the last time. As the door closed behind him, Mr. Jackson sat back in his chair, shaking his head. "Some people never learn," he murmured, before turning his attention back to business. But the story did not end there. A few days later, Mr. Jackson received a call from one of his trusted business partners. "Jackson, you won't believe this," the voice on the other end said. "That manager you fired? He's been going around town bad-mouthing you, trying to get hired somewhere else." Mr. Jackson chuckled. "Is that so?" he mused. "Let's see how far he gets." Meanwhile, the former manager found himself knocking on doors, walking into offices, and making calls, each one ending the same way. No one wanted to hire him. The Baby Hulk family's influence ran deep, and his reputation had already preceded him. Desperate, he tried reaching out to old contacts, but no one was willing to take a risk on someone who had been publicly exposed for his prejudice. With every rejection, reality began to sink in. One evening, as Mr. Jackson was leaving his office, he spotted the former manager standing across the street, looking lost. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was a silent exchange, one filled with regret on the manager's side and certainty on Mr. Jackson's. Mr. Jackson shook his head once more and got into his car, leaving the past behind him. The former manager had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. Moral lesson: treat every individual with respect and fairness, regardless of appearance or assumptions. Prejudice and discrimination not only harm others, but can also ruin one's own future. The way you treat people today determines the doors that will open or close for you tomorrow.